Let's start, have a word of prayer, and we'll get going here. Father, I just thank you for this day you've given to us. I just thank you for the beautiful sunshine that we have, even with the heat that comes with it. We just praise you, Father, how great a God you are, and just how amazing you are to declare your glory. Beyond that, you have given us your word, and I just thank you for that. Just thank you we have the opportunity that we can be here today and together with one another and fellow believers, and that we can open up your word and that we can look into it and that we can see what you have revealed to us about you. We just praise you for that. Just be with those that are not here today. Watch over them. Again, we just thank you for how great a God that you are. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to say it now. I just might as well. One more Sunday and we're done. I'm going to finish up the life of Joseph next Sunday. So if you want to hang on one more Sunday, come. I know what I said 10 weeks ago. I said it would be an 11-week course. Well, it's going to be a 9-week course or an 8-week course, something like that. So I apologize on that, except I just, the summer brings all kinds of different things. So, but we will finish up with the life of Joseph and all that goes on there. Again, I've enjoyed it. I've seen a lot of stuff, and there's been so much and everything. Since we didn't have class last week, I was doing, and the lesson I'm giving you today is not the lesson I started with. Again, I just, for Bible study stuff, a really good Bible study is to look into famines. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a really happy thing and everything, but as you begin to search and you look into the first famine that you'll meet is with Abraham. Abraham went to Egypt, got in trouble, but he went there. The next famine that comes up is with Isaac, and God says, don't go to Egypt, and he doesn't. And then the next one we have is what we see here. And then you proceed to go through there, and it's just amazing all the different things that come up about famines. And the one I'm reading with in my regular Old Testament reading and everything, David sins by numbering the people and everything, and God, gives them a choice of different things, of punishments and everything, and one was 3 years of famines. And so famine is just a very interesting thing that God utilizes throughout the scripture. It gets your attention. And I think that's what we have here. And that's why I went with this verse here, is that God's plan is, as you do your study and as you go through here, again, there is absolutely no way that I can, or anybody that I know of can, within an hour time, week after week after week, get everything that's in God's word. And so you need to be studying on your own and everything and seeing what God has revealed to us. One of the things I've talked about is that in Genesis 3:15 is that idea of a redeemer coming. And at the end of chapter 11 we have all the nations, and then after that we start narrowing it down. And our story is moving towards one particular called out group of people, and that's the children of Israel. And that's why it's just so interesting, this life of Joseph, what he's done here, is that God is moving forward, but there has to be adjustments. That's why I put that word there. Some adjustments are necessary as he's planning and as he's moving and everything. He's gone along for his plan. I shouldn't say he's planning. His plan was down before that. But as he moves along here, and Joseph is just part of that. And in verse 41:57 it says, the people from every country came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain because the famine was severe throughout the whole earth. A problem was arising. And we just kind of got a little picture of that. And again, we didn't even study. I asked you to look that up and study it on your own. Chapter 38, you just have this real quick little story about Judah. And the picture that we have there with Judah is that he is getting himself involved with the people of Canaan. And he's getting involved with their lifestyle and everything. And this is a problem. He moved off away from the brothers. Actually, that whole picture is that he went out on his own. If you read it and everything, it says that he joins up with another man for a business opportunity and everything, and he gets involved and he marries a Canaanite wife, and then it's amazing as you go through there. And so as they stay in this area, there's some problems. Simeon and Levi caused all kinds of problems. And so there's some kind of adjustments that needed to be there. And God takes Joseph for, again, he is not firstborn. He's firstborn of the favored wife and everything, but Reuben is the firstborn. But there's all these different little integral things that are taking place. And so as we move through the storyline, there's a lot of stuff we don't see, a lot of things that were not given to us. As we move into chapter 42, we're going to be looking through just some real quick stuff and everything. It says, in verse 1, if you read, it says, "Now Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, why are you staring at one another?" What seems to be the mood here in this scene here? And this is 20 years later. We haven't really talked about them for this part that we've gone through with Potiphar and with being in prison and Joseph, and then Joseph giving the dreams. We haven't talked anything about back in Canaan. That was 20 years ago. Now we've jumped forward and we're 20 years, and here we are. What's the mood with the brothers? And how about Jacob?
Well, the only reason that Egypt wasn't in the famine was because Joseph was there.
But and that's a legitimate question, don't you guys think? I mean, it's been 20 years. We haven't heard about Joseph, and who said Joseph was dead?
The brothers did to Jacob, but oh no, Jacob made that conclusion from.
Jacob made the conclusion that Joseph was dead.
Yeah.
They didn't kill him. They sold him off. They don't know where he is, except they know he went to Egypt. That's where the Ishmaelites were heading for.
Right, yeah.
So, and as you look at this is 20 years later. Now we're in a famine. A famine pops up, which gets attention and everything. Because their business, my understanding is that they are herders. Besides sheep, it'll be cattle, be whatever else that they have, donkeys. Never see them mention camels for them, so let's just stick with mules and donkeys and sheep and cattle and everything. They have to eat something. And so that's all dried up and everything. And as you look at it, it's kind of interesting. Again, this famine thing, as I started looking into the famine and everything, and as you move on and you get later on, God uses the famine. You get into Deuteronomy, and they talk about, I'm going to bring famine. And in the book of Ruth, famine. That's because they're being disobedient with what they're doing. And as God pulls them out of Egypt, he says, I'm putting you into a land of milk and honey, but it's a completely different land. They depended on the Nile River to overflow and put fertile ground down into plants and everything. Over in Canaan, they depended upon rain. And basically, this whole picture, obviously, is taking place with this massive famine, is that there's just no rain. And you need rain in the highlands and everything to create the water flow runoff for the Nile River and everything. So whatever God did with the weather, it affected Canaan and where else we don't know. It says the whole earth. We don't have anybody else to worry about. We just want to get the attention of Jacob and everything. So we see here, why are you sitting around? Yeah, the brothers say, you just said Egypt.
I think also it just indicates that, I don't know, Jacob's frustrated with his sons, that maybe they weren't very organized, they didn't take care of other people, they're all self-centered. Like when somebody isn't doing something, you say, why are you sitting around doing nothing? Get busy, get done. And they weren't making a plan.
Yeah.
They were just letting things happen. And
Yeah.
he was probably frustrated with them. I mean, their attitude is not good.
Who did he earlier have in charge of the business? Joseph. Why? Because Joseph wasn't because he was the favored son. There was more to it than just being a favored son. He had abilities and things, even at 17. Yeah, it just, and you look at verse 4, what else is Jacob's mood here? Verse 4 says, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, I am afraid that harm may befall him. 20 years have passed by, yet Joseph hasn't been forgotten, has he? I mean, really, and the brothers just have this hesitancy that there is taking place and everything. We just need to remember is that the famine was in the whole earth. The 10 brothers are not the only ones coming in. Here's, again, another picture that we have to remember. This is everybody. You know, this trip down to Egypt is not just the 10 brothers. This is the people in the land of Canaan. They've all heard. How did Jacob hear about that there? I'm pretty sure through Ishmaelites, another caravan that's gone through. They probably were carrying grain and everything. And so Genesis 41:57 says the people from every country came to Joseph. And then 42:5 says, so Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain. So this was a caravan going down to Egypt to buy grain. You know, again, this is a whole bunch of people are affected. Our focus is only on Jacob and his family and everything, but there's other people involved here. This is a mass event taking place, and these people are moving towards Egypt, and it appears that Joseph is in control of all the sales. I really don't understand how this took place, but it says, you know, as you get there, it says, now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. I put there, note the word governor or ruler. This sets us for the next scene coming up, but I really don't know how to picture this because it's very obvious that Joseph is right on site. Now, one commentator gives the idea that Joseph only handled the foreign groups of people coming in. And that may be. He may have been in charge because he could trust the Egyptians to go to one place. Now, if this was the United States and our bureaucracy, it probably wouldn't work out very good anyways. So, but anyways, you know, Joseph may have been just in charge for those coming from foreign countries because he'd be more astute of watching what's going on and making sure nothing bad happens. I don't know how Joseph's in charge. Joseph is out front, present. He is seen.
You would have known their language too.
Yeah, and he knows their language and everything, but he's right out front with all these people that are coming in to buy and everything. And the word, I think it's the ESV uses governor, other ones say ruler. He looked the part. Please remember that. When he was pulled out of the prison, they shaved him and cleaned him. I tried to do some looking up about one of the things is the Egyptians didn't like hair. Even looking at some of the paintings on some of the tombs and everything, it looks like they have hair. I guess they're wigs that they put on, that they shaved their heads and everything. Yeah, and they put false beards on and everything. Well, that'd be terrible. Look. You know, but you know, they shaved and everything, and then whereas he was Asiatic, if you want, Semitic and everything. They grew their hair much longer and everything. And so there is quite a distinction that he looks Egyptian, but he also looks like a ruler. You have to remember that. He stands out. He's completely different than everybody else that's there and everything. 20 years earlier, as you move through the text here and everything, chapter 37, he's 17 and he goes in front of his brothers, hear this dream that I have dreamed. And now this scene that we have, the brothers have come down to Egypt and everything. It says, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. When you go through your text, maybe underline each time you see how many times they bow down to their brother. You know, not knowing that it's their brother and everything. Who they saw in front of them, they had enough knowledge and enough understanding of Egypt that they were standing in somebody that was extremely important. And it's very possible got in there in town, maybe the sign says, all you foreigners step into this line, you have to be presented to the number 2 man of Egypt. Maybe, you never know. But by the time he got to that point, I'm pretty sure that the talk was, yeah, you want to buy grain, you got to meet up with number 2. He's just right below Pharaoh. I'm pretty sure that they had a pretty good idea of what's going on and everything. And then it says, in our text, it says of Joseph, which tells me, again, Joseph, again, I just have such a hard time with Henry Morris saying that he presented these dreams to his brother and to his father in a very prideful way. I just don't see that. I just have such a hard time, because he has carried himself from that age 17 all the way up to this point where he's 30 some years old. He hasn't fallen into remorse. He hasn't fallen into a depression. He's trusted God through the whole thing, and I believe he said those dreams to them because they were a group of people that were blessed. God came to great-granddaddy, grandpa, and to dad. Why would he not? That's why I just don't think it was a boastful thing. I was just thinking, hey, God gave this dream for all of us. It's not just for me. And so I just don't see that whole thing, but he remembers it. It just comes to him that is. Now, does his attitude change, or what takes place? The moment then he remembered his dreams about him. Here is a pivotal point that I think we have here, is that how's he going to respond? 20 some years, basically 21 years later, there's his brothers, 10 of them. He knows Benjamin. Benjamin was already born and everything, but Benjamin's not there. And he said, I see my 10 brothers are here. I completely know, because all these other groups of people have been coming down from Canaan. In fact, they're probably coming from farther away to buy grain here. That's an interesting thing. The year of Jubilee, as I started studying famine and everything, you then get into the year of the Jubilee, because in the 7th year, you're not supposed to plow. So the question came up, if we're not supposed to plow and plant, how do we eat? And God said, in the 6th year, I give you 3 years of sustenance. And so as I thought about this, this abundant 7 years, that's what God did. He gave them 3 years worth on the 6th year, so that the 7th and 8th year are no big deal. And it's just how God operates, and he made these promises. And personally, this scripture was written down for the Israelites, so as they were going into the promised land, they already knew how God took care of them. So when they go into the promised land, he says, on the 7th year, don't plant, let it rest, because that's the Sabbath. It's a Sabbath rest. You need to let it rest. I will take care of you. Oh, wait a second. Here's a whole storyline, a whole historical narrative that I took care of these guys. I took care of your ancestors. I fulfill my promises. And so, they needed it. God gave it in his words written down, so that when they got into this promised land, they would know how to live according to his word. And that was the big struggle that they had going through there and everything. I call them adjustments, or call them testing. And I injected my own ideas. What does Joseph say to himself, have my brothers changed? I don't see Benjamin. Has Benjamin been mistreated? Is my dad even alive? Did Benjamin turn into, I'm gone? Now dad's turned around and gave him the coat of many colors and has taken him as a favored son. And are they hating him also? And have they killed him? I mean, a whole bunch has gone through Joseph's mind, I'm pretty sure, because I don't see Benjamin. Where is Benjamin? I don't see dad. I'm not sure if he really questioned why dad wasn't there or not. The brothers had to be there because of the fact that they represented a patriarchal or a actual group of people. You don't send servants that go into a foreign country. This is foreign negotiations, really. That's what's taking place here. So you don't send the lackeys, you send the brothers and everything. And so, as I said, right off the bat, it says he treated them harshly. I think God has taken Joseph, and Joseph is very wise. Joseph wants to know what his brother's about. I think this is all, God has moved his heart and mind so that he does this testing. Because we have to have this group of people, you know the storyline, so it doesn't really matter how it fits in the life. You know, we have to have a group of people removed from the land of Canaan and brought down and stuck into Egypt. It's got to be a semi-happy group. You know, this can't be a fractured group of people, even though there's fracturing happens. But, you know, it needs to be the whole group in agreement coming down and being, because God's protecting them. That's what's all being set up here and everything. I think God has used Joseph here to do that testing. He deals harshly with them. The first thing he says, you are spies. This is not an oddball thing. Is it? Not really. This is famine. Other nations are struggling. Maybe they're coming in here and they're trying to say, okay, we can raid Egypt, take over, and take all their supplies and everything. And so him saying you are spies is not really all that oddball. 3 days in prison. And in my notes there, that is not the penalty for being spies. The moment he said you are spies, what's the first thing that should have popped into their minds?
We're going to die.
They're going to die.
Yeah.
They are dead. You know, they're
Dead ducks.
yeah, dead ducks. They are in a foreign country. And I still, as I think about this whole thing, go all the way back to Abraham, and then you take Abraham and put it in Hebrews chapter 11. It says, I'm a stranger in the land. I'm a sojourner. They came down from Haran into the land that God has promised to them, the Canaan. But you're going to be strangers, or you're going to be sojourners. Like I said, there's another great Bible study. Just study the word sojourner. We have sojourners in the land of Canaan coming down in Egypt too. You are spies. You're going to die. Their heads are starting to spin. And then he goes and he throws them in a jail for 3 days. I'm going to be upfront and honest. Several of the commentators said this 3 days represents the 3 years he was in prison. I think he was in prison longer than 3 years. The 3 days, I like the 3 days because that seems to pop up 3 days in the belly of the whale, 3 days here. 3 days is a very interesting, another Bible study. Just look up 3 days and how it's utilized, or 3 years, or that 3 just comes up all over the place, and it has a depth there and everything. Nothing magical though. Please don't. That's not a magical. Numbers aren't magical or anything. But it has a meaning here, and it had impact on it. You're a spy. He just now incarcerated me for 3 days, which I think all this did is intensified. Are they going to have some big, huge party when all 10 of us are killed in front of these Egyptians? I mean, it just intensifies the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, you have said to them, this is through an interpreter. I make sure the interpreter is speaking the words of Joseph. Do this and live, for I fear God. The next verses tell you what they have to do, but I put there, an Egyptian fears God. Does that get their attention? What do you think? I mean, here we are. They're in a foreign country. They know this is a pagan country. In fact, they know they live in a pagan country. The land of Canaan is well for the child sacrifice, even at the time period that they're. That's why God gives them their time, but then ultimately when the children of Israel comes back, it's because that they didn't follow God because of their pagan worship, of their sacrifice of children and everything. But you have the Egyptians, the same thing. Potiphar and Potipharah, who was Joseph's father-in-law, they're named after the sun god Ra. The Egyptians, and 400 years later, we see all the gods that God reflects upon through the 10 plagues and everything. And we have here, these guys know he's number 2. He's accused them of being spies. They're now incarcerated, waiting to die. And then they're told, he says, I fear God. If their brains aren't functioning, they're functioning now, in my opinion. It should call attention to the fact and everything. And you see it, the verses 42, 21 through 22, it says, in truth, this is the brothers now talking. I get the idea. Joseph's there, the interpreter's here, and they start talking. And they say, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother. This is 21 years later. Their minds have been popped open. They thought they're going to die. It looks like they're going to die. And then he proceeds here to give them criteria what to do. And that criteria is, I want you to, because they said everything. We have a father. He's an old man. He had 12 sons. One son's not here anymore. He has the youngest one, which he didn't send down because he didn't want to send the youngest one. They gave everything out. So he knows Benjamin's alive, how he's treated them, but he knows Benjamin's alive, he knows his dad's alive and everything. And then he says to him, this is what I want you to do. Bring your youngest brother back. And it just, everything opens up in there. I put there, the brothers' consciences have not been seared. 20 years, what have they been thinking for 20 years? Have they just pushed Joseph out of their minds? 20 years have transpired with this lie. They let daddy, they did not, again, you could say they didn't lie. Probably a good American lawyer would say, well, no, they didn't lie. Jacob's the one that thought he died. They didn't say anything to that effect. But they haven't heard from him. And I again, sitting in and studying and trying to, did he have any opportunity to communicate with his brothers or family? I mean, this is a different time period. This is almost 4,000 years ago. They didn't have texts and telephones and things like that. But I get the idea he made no attempt, and I don't know how he would have. So maybe that's why it just doesn't fit into to even think it out or anything. But you see, his brothers, he hears them because he understands language. And that's why you have Simeon is bound. Why isn't Reuben bound? He's the firstborn.
Reuben tried to save him.
Yeah, and he heard it. He didn't know it, but he heard the conversation, and Reuben said, I told you so. Reuben's a character. Firstborn, that's why he doesn't get the birthright. He's got some problems. But he did try to prevent him from killing her. So Simeon is the one that's bound and everything. Here's another thing. Again, the text doesn't jump on that, but later on we will as we move along here and everything. This whole thing is getting them to think. And it says they bound him, Simeon, in front of them. That's how the text reads there. I think it's interesting because I'm guessing after they leave, Simeon is unbounded. He might be even put in the same prison or a little bit better place where they all knew Joseph. Oh yeah, but they probably all told, don't you say a thing about Joseph being in prison and everything. But they probably took good care of him. Simeon is not mistreated or anything at all and everything. And I put, the return home. Can things get worse? You can read, and I kind of just jumped over and everything, but the standout verse is Jacob there in verse 36. He said, you're making me childless. Joseph is gone. Simeon is gone. Now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. What is Jacob's mindset?
He's not looking at his other sons. It seems like they don't even exist.
Well, he's got Simeon dead now. I mean, and who is Jacob? Who is Jacob?
He's a trickster, he's a manipulator.
Yeah,
Hmm?
a manipulator.
He's a manipulator. Oh, most definitely. But what else is he?
Father.
Keep going.
I don't know what you're thinking.
Oh, no, I don't either. But, no, no. What do you know about Jacob? I stood out with the camera this way, and What do you know about Jacob?
He was a twin.
He was a twin. Okay, he was a twin. What else?
Dramatic.
Extremely.
Yeah, from the beginning.
From the beginning. Continue on now. Go through his life.
He was dramatic about his work, about his wives, about how he manipulated his father to giving him the birthright. I mean, it sounds like his mother was a bit of a treat as well, so probably took more after her.
Okay,
The manly father.
Okay, keep going, and now you've covered the one side of him. What's his next side?
He was broken.
Okay, keep going now. He's broken, and then what happened?
God used him to build this nation,
He's Israel, is he not?
and he seems to have forgotten that all sons.
Bingo.
It's kind of like Abraham taking Isaac to be sacrificed. But I think Abraham always had it in his mind, because I've recently gone over that again. And Abraham never forgot. He always knew
No.
his life had to come from Isaac.
He did not. Yeah, he did not forget. Abraham did. It's another test. Abraham willingly took him for the sacrifice here, and he knew, because just through the statements, he knew that God would raise him and everything. Jacob has forgotten. That's a picture I see here. He's forgotten his brothers. I mean, his sons. It's just like they've all just kind of melted away. But yet,
He forgot
back
God's
to
promises.
he forgot God's promises at Bethel, Jacob's ladder. He forgot the wrestling with God. He still limps. That hasn't been changed. We get this 20-year picture, and it just seems like he fell into 20 years of just kind of forgetting where he was, who he was.
Grief can do that to you. Grief can do that to you.
Yeah, it can. But it didn't to Joseph.
Joseph's made of stronger stuff. And Joseph trusted God.
Yeah, Jacob will. But it just, there's a picture here. It seems like it's just like things were probably not a great aspect those 20 years back in Canaan with Jacob lamenting. I mean, just the way you see the statements here and everything, he probably lamented about Joseph all the way through. Who knows what he said to the other brothers, what he said to his sons. He may have called up different times and said, or he may not even been communicating anymore with them. He did fall into an aspect that you see here and everything. And he just hits this point here. And then you had Reuben's offer. Reuben is the firstborn. And he's trying to step up. He's trying to gain back. The story of Reuben, why he's not the birthright person, is because he slept with one of the wives. That kind of messed things up there for Reuben there. He's still trying to be that leader and everything. And he says, you can take my two sons and kill them if Benjamin doesn't come back. You can walk out and contemplate on that one. That's extreme. That's extreme. And the answer is no. Benjamin is not going to Egypt. Not at all. You go to chapter 43, and it says, let's move on. Chapter 43, now the famine was severe in the land. How many times do we have to be told that this famine is severe? In the dream, and Joseph, as he talks to, and as the text is written there with Pharaoh, I think it's been multiple times repeated. A couple times about the abundance, but the famine's severe. This famine is so severe, you're going to forget that abundance. And the abundance was phenomenal. You know how phenomenal the abundance was? We have other countries coming and purchasing from them, and they have plenty of store. The abundance is humongous. This is what God can do. This is not This is not done because the Egyptians and their Nile gods and their crocodile gods and their frog gods or anything. This is because God gave them the abundant produce each year of those 7 years. That was phenomenal, that other countries are coming in and buying. You know, that's one of the pictures that the children of Israel, as they're reading this, begins the Exodus, and Moses puts this down and this begins to be read to them, and they hear this. This is to tell them when God says, I'm taking you to a land flowing with milk and honey, he really meant it, but it means that you're going to have to follow me and trust me 100%. It'll rain because I say it rains, and it's because you are obedient. Don't follow after the gods of the people there. The people that, well, you were supposed to chase them out. You didn't chase them all out. And then you start taking, oh, wait a second. You brought some of the gods with you out of Egypt. It's just a continuing problem that they had there and everything. This famine is severe. And now the famine was severe in the land. So it came about when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back. What's the next thing it says? Go buy us
A little food.
a little food. What in the world is this man thinking? This is not food just for 10 people. This is food for a whole business. This is food not for the people. This is food for the animals, the stock, the livestock, our livelihood. He is in such a position here that he's so far down. And this, as I put up here, Reuben now takes the lead. Judah does. Judah now, he goes and he says, I myself will be a surety for him. You may hold me responsible for him. See where the change here is taken? This is not, here, kill my kids. This is me. A big change that's taken place here. And I put here, note Jacob's change that takes place there. It says, then their father, and it's used a couple of places where Moses, as editing, will use, the Israel sons and everything to kind of help as you go through. But their father Israel said to them, this is a change of heart, it's saying. He's starting to remember now that he wrestled with God. He remembered his dreams that he had, that God said, I am going to, all the way back, we'll talk about that. God said, I'm going to take care of you. In fact, I gave you 2 dreams through one of your sons that said, I'm going to take care of you. And so this 20 years of missing Joseph,
Yeah.
maybe, you're okay, James. This 20 years here, he should have been trusting God. Said, there's a reason here, God. I don't understand what's going on, but I trust you. I really don't know if Joseph's dead. I made an assumption. He should have, no one ever really said he was dead. And God hasn't even told him that he's dead or anything. But he had these 2 dreams that were given to him, and he pondered on them. He still reprimanded him, but he pondered on them and everything. And we see that this change that he has, that as he leaves, verse 14, he says to his sons, he finally says, you can go. He says, may God grant you compassion. He's now looking to God and trusting God, and they make their return to Egypt. Back in Egypt, I guess I like this getting strange. They get there. Joseph, again, they must get into the line, the foreigners' line, and they're going to go buy their grain again, knowing the process. They have Benjamin there. Joseph, let's say Joseph's up on some big platform overseeing all the processing and everything, and he sees Benjamin. Benjamin's alive, for sure. I now know that. I see him. And so he says to them that they need to come to his house. I'm not even that advanced in any of my social skills at all. I want to try to think. I go to England, and I'm traveling to England, and of course I don't have a good high regard for the monarchy anyways, but as I get invited to come to the Queen's house. What? Why? You know, I hear these guys, they've already run into Joseph, they've been put in jail, they've been called spies, and now they're asked to come to his house. And then the steward says to them, be at ease, do not be afraid. And here it comes again. We had earlier, Joseph said, through the interpreter, he says, I fear God. There's another Bible study, the fear of God. People don't look at that as some short little thing. The fear of God is momentous. It's unbelievable. He says, your God. He says, what does this guy know about my God? And he says, then the God of your father. That should spark a whole lot of stuff. Because God talks about, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It should have all of a sudden, and then he proceeds to say, that money that was put in your bags was not the payment. It was a gift. It was not the payment. We got your money. You paid for it. We gave you a gift. And again, we don't get the text here of feeling what their attitude is, but it's phenomenal. And they go to Joseph's house for dinner. And again, they bowed down. And you know how many times they bowed down now? You know, it continues on. You know, that dream, the impact there is that, and they tell him, your servant, our father as well, he is alive. And then he asks, is this your youngest brother? And they say, yes, it is. And that's when Joseph breaks down. He does not reveal himself yet, even though he breaks down crying. And I just put up here, just note this table arrangement. There's 3 tables. Joseph table. Why? Why is it Joseph by himself?
Egyptians don't eat herders.
But the second table is Egyptians. The third table is the brothers. Who is Joseph?
He's a ruler.
He's a ruler. They had a caste system. He was royalty. I get invited to the Queen's house. I'll not eat with the Queen. And my wife would have to restrain me because I'd probably make some comment about, my ancestors left a long time ago because of you people. But anyways, you know, it's just, he was royalty. There was this caste system, but then you're right. The next table are those people that work with him, who are Egyptians. Then the third table, and I want to do a study on that whole thing, and it's just, it just takes you a long way to see. I guess, and I wanted to verify this, and so I'm just going to throw it out. You can do it in your own studies. Egyptology, I know all of you have tons of books on Egypt, and you love to study that kind of stuff, and they may give the idea that they didn't eat cattle, but I'm not really sure if that's true or not. I know Hindus don't, but the Asiatics, if that's a term I'll use for all the people that are land of Canaan, which includes the Hebrews, they ate cattle. They ate, you know. So part of it is they say is that they ate the animals that they worship, but the other thing is that they just look like a motley crew. They got beards, they got long hair. They dressed different and everything, and they just had that prejudice.
They were just snobs. Right.
You're right. And guess what? This is a Dan speculation. You can do. I probably should silent the. I think they look the same. They're all from the same stock, really. Children of Ham, children of Shem. They all live in the same. I mean, sometimes I just wonder about that whole thing. But yes, they were snobbish because the Egyptians at this point in time, probably again, as you study your Egyptian history and everything, they are very, very elitist. And there are other groups of people. the other groups are starting to formulate and everything and coming to the nation level, but they're in that nation aspect that they're very they are elitists and everything. And there's some things that take place through there. So first of all, they have a caste system. So yes, the royalty doesn't eat with the regular Egyptians, but Egyptians do not. And the funniest thing is, what's Joseph?
He's a Hebrew.
He's a Hebrew. God is a phenomenal God. Pharaoh took him, and by changing his name and giving him an Egyptian wife, particularly an Egyptian wife that was related to one of the, for this time period in the Middle Kingdom, one of the upper gods and everything. It basically was adoption, that he was made an Egyptian. He was seen as an Egyptian, which is just so extremely interesting and everything. And look what he does. He arranges them in birth order, and then he turns around and he gives 5 times as much to Benjamin. How do they respond to Benjamin, baby Benjamin, getting the big treatment? This is a test. Joseph wants to know. He was given a coat of many colors. They stripped it off of him, threw him in a pit, and wanted to kill him. Plus, they can start talking, and Joseph understands everything they're saying because he's a Hebrew and he understands the language. How do they respond? That's what he's watching. He's looking and see how are these guys going to respond to this momentous treatment that this baby brother who is of the favored wife, how are they? He wants to know. 20 years have transpired. Have these guys gotten even more hateful? Or have they been found out and the guilt is starting to crush in on them? And he saw that earlier, that the guilt crushed in on there as I move along here. The last test of Joseph's brothers, chapter 44, and I've just kind of...
Go on any further.
Yeah.
What 4 words could 43:18 translated into?
.43:18 says, now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, it is because of the money that was returned in our sacks, and the first time that we are being brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for slaves with our donkeys.
Another way, it's just our goose is cooked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the fear is there. They're thinking. They really are.
Yeah.
And then they sit at dinner with them. Wait a second. Question, and don't answer it. You walk out of here. Your brothers and your sisters treated you exactly the same way Joseph was treated. Now you're head honcho. How would you respond to them? Now, this is one thing. Joseph doesn't, there's no vengeance here at all. And he could have immediately, he could have drug it out and tortured them all the way. I've watched too many murder mysteries in my time period and everything. I could see all the way, what was it, 10 little Indians, and then there were none. They just, keep executing each person along the way to torture them all the way. No, he does not do that at all. This is a testing to see. He wants reconciliation. And then chapter 44, they have dinner with them. They're like totally boggled in their brains. They're given all the grain that they need, and they're told to send them on the way. Joseph tells his steward, he says, put my cup, the silver cup, that's key, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his money for the grain. And then they start heading back to Canaan and everything. And you see that then he says, okay, go after them, pursue them. It says, the servant pursues the brothers there, and the first thing he's to reply, you have suggested your own punishment. The one who has it will become my slave. This is so interesting. As they pursue him and everything, they say, please, please, whoever has the cup, kill them, and we will become your slaves and everything. And the servant says, you've suggested your own punishment. The one who has it will become my slave. That's not what the brothers said. The brothers said, kill him. And they said, we will be your slaves. Whoever else will all be your slaves. But then the steward says, but the rest of you go free. That was an out. That's part of the test. Is they have an out here. They could have left Benjamin and hightailed it out of there. That's really what the choice could have been. That's part of the test here and everything. Note to change verse 9, what the brother said. Verse 9 there says, whomever your servant is found, let him die, and we will be my Lord's slaves. That's another study in itself. How many times they call him Lord or Master. That all fits in with the dream. Are we going to worship you? Are we going to be subservient to you? Oh, little Joseph, we're going to kill you. And multiple times they call him Lord. They call him Master and everything. And we see what's going on there. Joseph states in verse 17, he does the same thing again. They said, kill the person that it was found. But in verse 17 he says, but he said, far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the cup has been found, he shall be my slave. You can go in peace. He gave them a second time that they could take off and go from there. I don't always make comments about the pictures I put up there, but I wanted to make a comment about this. This isn't quite as accurate as the one that I was looking at. This is finding the cup in Benjamin's bag and everything. But the one that I was looking at, I'm sorry, they look so like a bunch of Americans that I just couldn't put up there. So I had to go for something from 1747. It was just like, and it's still, the Italians have a wonderful way of giving their own interpretations and everything. But that silver cup, it's just like, that's a possessive thing. That's royal number 2 guy there. And then Judah just continues to step up here. And again, they threw themselves. They started out, they bowed down. Now they threw themselves down to the ground and everything. This is the 3rd time. And he said, so now please let your servant, this is Judah, remain as my Lord's slave instead of the boy. As for the boy, let him go back with his brothers. 20 years earlier, Judah says, come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. Big change. Big change. And again, in your minds, you should see some of the things that God is doing now, because later on in next week when we talk about the blessings and everything, you're going to see something different, something more said about Judah. Judah caused problems and everything, but again, if you listen to the study on the book of Ruth, and at the very chapter 4, end of chapter 4, you find out that through the line of Judah is Perez. Perez is the one that comes out of his relationship with Tamar. All of a sudden, they're in the line of Christ. I mean, it's just what God does over time, and as he works, we in our finite little minds just cannot even grasp the plans of God. We can't even come near. We struggle with stuff. We struggle with a whole year of things going on, and what's going to be the future, what's going to happen, what's going to be happening in 2022. Oh, I know what's going to happen in 2022, this and this and this and this. No, you don't know that. We don't know. We are told to do one thing, and one thing only, really, is to trust God for everything and to live for him. And that's what we need to do and everything. And you see there, it says, how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? Don't do this. It says, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father. The brothers have changed. Joseph, the test has shown to Joseph. These guys have a heart. They didn't sear their hearts completely. They're so evil and everything. They have a heart that is tender and it can be open. And all Joseph is doing is trying to restore. No vindication, no vindictiveness or anything. Joseph isn't punishing him or anything. Does God test us? Yes. We've already had a lesson talking about the testing of God. God tests us. There's nothing wrong with Joseph, what he did here. He could have been vindictive. most assuredly, but he wasn't. He's looking for restoration and everything. Joseph's godly character continues all the way through. Please see that. Slave, prisoner, godly character. Number 2, godly character. 7 years of abundance. He's still in charge, godly character. And now we're beginning the 7 years, godly character. And we'll see next week as we get to the end of the chapter. His godly character carries all the way to the day he dies. Now, I don't even need to mention, you can go out on your own and do the study and look at the people of 20th and 21st century, godly people that have hit the top and it goes to their heads. They do stupid stuff, they sin left and right because they're snobs. They turn into snobs. They think they know everything. I'm sorry, even though we don't get the daily journal of Joseph for his whole 110 years of life, the pictures we're given in Texas as he's a godly model. He knows God. He trusts God all the way through. He made his dad look bad. And all that's going on there. As we finish up here and everything, God's promised Abraham. God told him, says, I'm giving you a land, that's Canaan. It's a big area, but I just use Canaan. He's going to make a nation, a great nation. It's going to be Israel. We're coming down to this little focus point. I've chosen this group of people, and there's a blessing. I just kind of put that blessing to the nations that bless them. And do we see this in the story of Joseph? We already see a little picture of that. Potiphar, he's blessed. I mean, Potiphar is blessed. Egypt is blessed. They gave him 7 years of an abundance that is just phenomenal that we can't even talk about because they stopped numbering it. It was so phenomenal. And you're going to see, next week, you're going to see how that blessing continues on and what the Pharaoh does. It's just the action that Pharaoh does is beyond belief and reality. Only a thing of God. And that's why I put it. It's got to be done God's way. These guys had to be shaped and molded. Joseph tested them. They needed it because they need to preserve. Because Genesis 15, God told Abraham, says, your descendants are going to be in a foreign country for 400 years, and then I'm going to bring them out. They already knew. They already knew they were going to go to another foreign country. And here it is. It's starting. God's setting up the whole thing. It's taken 100 years or so, a couple hundred years. He's setting this up. And Joseph's part of the plan, and he's not even the firstborn. You know, something that you just kind of look at, just the way God takes a different person and moves and uses them and everything. The family had to be together. That's the best way. The family had to be together, and this whole thing coalesces them together. I really will go home and think about it. Dad, Joseph is alive. What do you mean Joseph's alive? Well, he's number 2 in Egypt. What? How did he get to Egypt? I just think about that. 20 years I've thought my son was dead. And you guys said nothing about that you made, what was it, 30 pieces of silver or 20? 20, I think it's 20 pieces of silver. Well, who knows what they did with that? 2 pieces of silver each. It was gone. I just can't imagine, and yet his attitude is going to be twice he'll say it. He said, you meant it as evil, God meant it for good. Let's move on. Really, that's a Joseph's attitude. Do we do that when we get wronged? I tell you, I've been wronged various times. I've held a short grudge. I don't do long grudges because they put you in the hospital. But yeah, we do that. What an example we have here. God told Abraham, this is the covenant, and it continues on. They still are a chosen people. And they're going to be tried and tested again some more. being tested now. But as believers, we're also given promises. And we too will be tried and tested. That's endurance. That's what we need. We're going to need more endurance, I think, in these coming years. There, I already said I don't know what the future is, but I do believe things are getting rough. We need to be able to do what Joseph did. No, I can't give you this dream, but God can give it to you. No problem to saying to a Pharaoh who thought he was God that God would give the dreams. He really had no problems. I'm pretty sure that his wife probably was a believer because he had no problems telling her about God, even though she was raised with sun god Ra and everything. He had no problem. Look, his stewards talked about God. His interpreters talked about God. They all knew and were exposed. He had no fear, and yet he was in a foreign country. He knew he was a foreigner, and yet God blessed him so phenomenally, and he didn't care. He could have been killed. And we read in Hebrews, you got a lot of people that did talk about God, and they died. I mean, that does happen. Father, just thank you for this time that's given to us. Thank you for your word. We just thank you for the life of Joseph. Help us to go from here and to contemplate your word even more and just go further into study and be with the service coming up. We just ask for your blessing. Help us that we'll praise and worship you in all that we are doing. In Jesus' name, amen.